Hey everybody, Murphy Daily here on Written by Murphy, and this is a moment of wonder. This is a different one. I want to talk to you about an adventure I'm thinking of having. There's a pretty good chance I'm going to be going to take a trip to Chicago in August. No, not August, October, the other month. There's a good chance I'm going to be going to Chicago, and I'm thinking, I have been wanting to see Chicago. I've never been to Chicago, and I know it's a great metropolis of the world, and I've been wanting to go see it. And as I prepare to go, naturally, I think about books that are set in Chicago. I'm thinking about what books have I read that were set in Chicago? So before I talk about the books that are set in Chicago, let me tell you my impression of Chicago here from a distance, right? Chicago is a big, huge metropolis, and therefore, and it's an American metropolis. Therefore, books about big, huge American metropolis all sound like New York City. So it's hard for me to tell from a book that describes a big, fat metropolis that this one is not New York City, because it seems like they're all New York City, unless they're very substantially different. And having been raised and spent 95% of my life on the West Coast, it all seems like everything east of the West Coast is New York, right? I know that's not true, and I have some impression of Chicago, which is one of the reasons I'm eager to go there. But I'm not familiar with the names of places and specific landmarks. So unless New York City has an ocean by it, and Chicago has a really big body of water. So I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't really pierce my awareness. But I know I would like to become more aware of what's going on in Chicago. I would like to be have a sense of what it's like, right? So here are some books that I have read that are set in Chicago. For sure, The Jungle. I definitely have had an impression that The Jungle is in Chicago. The Jungle is talking about animals being prepared for market, like made into sausages, etc. And so that to me definitely seems like, oh, that's not in New York City, because New York City is not a farming location. I mean, it probably was once, but that one feels like Chicago, so I instantly thought of that. The other book that I've read that was very definitely Chicago is The Devil in the White City. Okay, first of all, The Jungle is a very compelling book, but it's a bummer of a book. The Devil in the White City, also the same, very compelling book. Not fiction, well, fiction-ish, but it's talking about a real mass murder and the real 1893, what is it, World's Fair or something like that in Chicago. And so definitely both of those, I know those are Chicago. The third one that I know is in Chicago, Sister Carrie. That's a really good book. It has excellent turns of phrase. The prose is very good. Sister Carrie by Drieser. I liked that one. And it felt very New York City because it was set in, it kind of could have gone either way, but I remembered, oh yeah, this one is Chicago. It felt like another story of a girl in the big city making her way in the world, and the deck is stacked against her kind of thing. So I really liked that book. When I was doing a little bit of a research for this moment of wonder, I found out that the play Proof, which also became a movie, was set in Chicago. I love that play. I love it. It's beautiful. I love how it's very thinky, and there's a female protagonist, which is super awesome. So totally oblivious. Actually, that one, I wasn't sure where it was. It could have been anywhere on the East Coast. And in fact, it's not even on the East Coast. It's somewhere academic is what it felt like to me. So, but it turns out this is Chicago. Then another one. This one is modern. Time Traveler's Wife. when I found out in this research that Time Traveler's Wife was set in Chicago, that got me really excited, because the image in Time Traveler's Wife, which I found a really good book, I guess it was made into a movie too, but the book, which I haven't seen, but the book was really romantic and compelling, and just, I loved all the people and I love the settings. And when the time traveler talks about getting trapped in this particular cage in the library, I want to see that cage. I wanted to see it before I knew it was a real thing. But it is a real thing. It's in Chicago. It's in a library. I want to go and see it. That sounds crazy amazing. I'd love to see it. I have no idea if I'll be able to get to do that during my work trip, but that's one of the places I'd like to see in Chicago. So that. And you know, Time Traveler's Wife is interesting because it has these two periods. Talk about time switching. It switches for when the wife herself is a young woman, and the older time traveler, the older version of the time traveler, goes back and meets her as a young child. It is set in this kind of rural setting, which could be New York. New York has rural things around it, New York City. But then again, the way they set it, then I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because it is sort of something about the ruralness of Chicago is not elite. Like the ruralness of New York City, if you have some rural other place that you go to, if you have New York City and somewhere rural, then you're rich. But it wasn't clear to me, it didn't seem to me when they were first discussing this that these people were high money people. They just seemed more ordinary, that there were these two locations. So that makes sense to me. Chicago is more approachable, I think. Or, yeah, it's a close drive to approachable. I don't know how to explain that. Now, another book that I have started but not finished because I got it, and then, you know, that tragedy that sometimes occurs, you lose the book and don't find it again. So, Native Son. I lost it, and it's a downer of a book. I mean, I lost it just as the guy, the main character, was about to have something terrible happen. So I'm like, oh, I lost it, but I didn't go seek it out because I knew it was a bad thing, and I just was like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to go follow him down that road. It was going to be a bummer, and so that's set in the protagonist is a African American who doesn't have an easy time of it. So, and then I discovered that Saul Bellow wrote The Adventures of Augie March, which is set in Chicago. He himself, Saul Bellow, is Canadian, and he set this whole life of the protagonist, the hero, Augie March, across the landscape of Chicago and the surrounding areas. I thought, oh, this one won some great acclaim when it first came out. I've read some by Saul Bellow. I'm like, I could do that. So I'm thinking of going to Chicago in October. I'm like, there's my reading list. I could go try this one, Adventures of Augie March, which was published in 1953. And I could see what it tells me. So this is really fun to me, to talk about books that are set in a certain location. And there are a lot of books that are, you can definitely go find books that are associated with a theme, a location, or a certain theme. And I'm like, maybe I could do some moments of wonder like that. I'd love to hear if you have any recommendations of books that are set in Chicago or the surrounding area. And or any stories about Chicago, places maybe I should see if I can. So that's me taking a moment to wonder about books that are set in Chicago and books that have similar locations to tie them together. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about it, what you think about it. Let's continue the conversation.